Do you want to know how to guard your steps and make sure that you're following the right way? We're going to talk about that today in Proverbs chapter 14. Hey guys, and welcome back to God's Word Made Simple by Simple Servant Ministries. My name is Aaron Hawk, and if this is your first time visiting with us, I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. God's Word Made Simple is an online discipleship ministry dedicated to taking God's Word and making it simple. We want to help you understand God's Word, apply it to your life, and grow in your relationship with the Lord. And by the way, guys, if you appreciate this ministry and this channel, at some point make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn that bell notification to all so you don't miss any future videos. All right, guys, let's get into the text. So in verse 10 is where we're starting. If you didn't catch the previous video, you can catch it up here. But remember, as I say so often in the Proverbs, each section can generally be taken on its own, sometimes as little as 1 or 2 verses, sometimes 3 or 4 or even 10 verses. But the Proverbs are a collection of general truths, things that are generally true, but there doesn't mean that there are not exceptions. Okay, so verse 10, the heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. In other words, what we are feeling internally, only we can truly know what that feels like and what our joys and angers and hurts are. Now, ultimately, God knows as well, but speaking as a human, ultimately, we can only know what it feels like to walk in our own shoes, is the way we might say it. Verse 11, the house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. Now notice the juxtaposition, the comparison between a house and a tent, right? The house of the wicked will be destroyed. Now, in general, houses are considered pretty sturdy, especially back then. If you didn't have a sturdy dwelling, it's a tent. But if you had a house, you were safe, you were secure. That was a sturdy place, right? The house of the wicked will be destroyed. So even though the wicked have better stuff sometimes, it's still for nothing because it's going to be destroyed. And even though sometimes the upright don't have as much, a tent compared to a house, it will flourish. Now, verse 12 is a very well-known verse in the Christian community, so this would be one to file away if you don't know it. There is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because otherwise I'd end up doing a whole video just on this, which I could at some point. But right now, I just want to hit this one. There is a way which seems right to a man. In other words, the natural inclination of the human heart, the way that we would just naturally go on our own. It seems right to us through our own logic and experience. We're like, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. But when we follow our own sinful heart and not the principles of God, but its end is the way of death. There's a reason that's such a popular verse, because we always think we can do it on our own without God, and yet we truly need God. Verse 13, even in laughter the heart may be in pain, and the end of joy may be grief. A couple of things from here. One, somebody that's hurting can appear okay. Even in laughter, the heart may be in pain. You may, in your pain, either be able to mask it or put on that facade for other people, or you may forget momentarily in the midst of deep pain and allow yourself to laugh, but that doesn't take away the depth of the pain in that moment. And the end of joy may be grief. Now, you could take that a couple of ways. It's most logically a follow-up to the previous one saying you're just going to end up in grief again when you're in pain, when your heart is hurting. All right, so let's move on to 14. The backslider in heart will have his fill of his own ways. So someone who in their own heart is not committed to living right, they're going to have their fill of their own ways. It's kind of like, and this is not good parenting, by the way, I don't agree with this, but it's kind of like I grew up hearing stories about a parent that caught a child smoking, so they'd make them smoke the entire pack all at once so that the kid would get sick, so that they would no longer want cigarettes. Now, in a demented way, that may work, but I don't recommend doing that. 1, it's illegal. 2, it's abuse. 3, it's just dumb. But It might work. Dumb things work sometimes. But that's the mental picture that I have here. The backslider in heart will have his fill of his own ways. In other words, someone who's not committed to moving forward, to growing, to doing right, eventually they're going to realize how empty their life is and how worthless it is, and they're going to despise their own life. They're going to have their fill of it. They're done with it, right? But a good man will be satisfied with his. See, someone who chooses to do right, they may not look like everybody else, and that's not a bad thing, by the way, but they may not look as successful as other people, but they can look back on their life with pride and be satisfied with their life instead of being filled with regrets. All right, verse 15, the naive believes anything, but the sensible man considers his steps, right? And that's kind of the definition of someone that's naive, is they just follow along, they believe anything, right? And these people get into a lot of trouble. We've talked about this in previous Proverbs. But the sensible man considers his steps. See, if you don't want to be naive, you need to think through things before acting on them, and you need to have the sense to know how to process through things as well. I've talked about that a good bit in previous Proverb videos, so if you haven't heard me talk about that, just check out the Proverbs series in general up here, and you can catch that. I'm not going to go more in depth in that today because I feel like I've covered it a good bit previously. Verse 16, a wise man is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is arrogant and careless, and the implication being they turn toward evil. And we've seen this theme a lot through the Proverbs as well as the rest of scriptures in general. But this one, I love the way that this one is worded. A wise man is cautious and turns away from evil. In other words, if you want to be wise, the way that you do that is you live in such a way that you don't allow yourself to be put in compromised positions, and you don't allow yourself to go towards sin when you can catch it. Now, it's kind of a catch-22 because in order to have that kind of sense, you need to have some wisdom. And one of the ways that you demonstrate your wisdom is by doing that. So that's why the Proverbs say get wisdom. That's why the Proverbs tell us to get wisdom more than anything else, to desire wisdom. Because wisdom is an exponential growth. The more you have, the more you will get because you have more to work with. Okay, verse 17. A quick-tempered man acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated. And right, if you've ever been around somebody that has a quick temper, I did as a child, I've known lots of other people that have. If you've ever been around somebody that was a quick-tempered person, they always end up in trouble because they fire off before they even know what's going on. And then they end up in all kinds of trouble, and everybody just knows that they're a fool. And then the second part of this, and a man of evil devices is hated. Now, these go together. These aren't just two completely separate thoughts, right? A foolish person or a quick-tempered person acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated. In other words, it's just as bad to plot evil as it is to be caught up in evil because you are quick-tempered. So, control your temper. Learn wisdom so that you can control your heart and your actions. By the way, it has to be in that order. All right, last verse for today, verse 18. The naive inherit foolishness, but the sensible are crowned with knowledge. We kind of addressed that one earlier in verse 15. It's basically a parallel. The naive inherit foolishness. In other words, by default, since naive people are just led about and they don't really have any sense, they inherit foolishness. It's just they end up in trouble because that's what happens when you're not paying attention. But the sensible, the people who have wisdom, who have some sense, they are crowned with knowledge. Again, wisdom is an exponential growth product. The more you have, the more you will be able to get. It feeds on itself to give you more. So you can be a fool or you can choose wisdom. And that really is the message of all of Proverbs. All right, guys, that is it for today. So if you appreciate this ministry and this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe, turn that bell notification to all. Make sure to share this video with somebody as well if you appreciate this content, you think that it would bless them. And if you want to bless this ministry, there is a link down in the description to tell you how you can support us as well. Guys, thank you very much, and God bless.